Thank you, Dr. Rosker. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, hey, good morning, everyone. And, I must admit, I've been looking forward to this conference all year. I was really excited to travel to Berlin to be with you all, but unfortunately, I'm stuck on this continent for a few more months. But that said, my disappointment of not being there in person is overshadowed by my excitement for the long-term future of automotive tech and the user experience in the cockpit. The auto industry is clearly at a crossroads, and I feel rather lucky to be a part of it. Okay, but before we march on too far into the future, I think we all have to stop and for a moment and take stock of where we are today. I think we need to first address this elephant in the room, and that is social media and big tech inside the car. So let's take a few minutes this morning, figure out what's going on, and let's do that by starting at the beginning, really. In 1982, a guy named Walter Doherty published a research paper in the IBM Systems Journal. And in that paper, he set the requirement for human computer response time to be 400 milliseconds, just under a half a second. And that is when a computer program returns a response to a human request in under 400 milliseconds, it has exceeded the Doherty threshold. And use of such an application was deemed to be addictive. Right, so here are some more numbers. 40 minutes a day, that's the average session time on YouTube. So even if you only plan to spend 5 seconds watching that funny cat video, you get sucked into 40 minutes. 2 hours and 22 minutes. That's the average time an American spends on social media a day. It's a little less in Europe, but not really too much. And then 12 hours is the total screen time for all devices. So if you don't agree that humans are addicted to and distracted by big tech and social media, then take a look at some of these videos. All right, at first glance, watching these addicted victims of the Doherty threshold, it's kind of funny, right? But in reality, it's rather sad, and often it's even more than sad. At times, it can be downright tragic. And you could say that these people only have themselves to blame. And as a result, only they are paying the price. But if you put these same distracted citizens behind the wheel of a 2-ton car racing down the road at 60 miles per hour, then a lot more people are going to pay the price, get hurt, and even die. Today, drivers take selfies. They live stream on Facebook while driving. They try to impress others with Snapchat's speed filter. They read and respond to text messages. They scroll through news feeds. According to the Center for Disease Control, in the US alone, 9 people die every day because of distracted driving while using social media. And of course, rather than solve the root cause of this problem, which is our addiction, we instead pad lampposts and warn people with street signs that their addiction to Facebook could potentially kill them. So what's my purpose here today? Well, all of us at this conference, we're not lawmakers or big tech executives who can single-handedly change the direction of our society with the flick of a business model switch. But we are UI technologists. And quite frankly, we are the stewards of the automotive user experience. We do hold the keys to a better future. And my purpose here today is to explore how we can do that. So I've framed this discussion as an epic battle, or maybe even more like a strategic game between tech giants and the traditional OEMs and auto companies. And the pawns in this game are the car buyers, the passengers, and the drivers. So let's start with big tech. Who are they? Facebook, Apple, Twitter, Microsoft, Google, Baidu, and a plethora of other global powerhouses. These are the companies who have mesmerized us. We love to hate them and we hate to love them. They were once the heroes, now they're being cast as the villains. And why is that? Well, it's essentially the business model. To gain rapid market share, a tech company must give away information or access for free. How do they recoup that investment? Well, advertisers pay them to get access to the tech company's market share. Once the advertisers have you hooked, then marketplace platforms use data about you to persuade you to make a final purchase. In general, this is the essence of the big tech business model. But of course, someone actually has to make a product to sell, and these are the manufacturers. And that business can be profitable, but it's not the money printing machine that big tech commands. The question is, can car companies run that same playbook? Can they monetize that situation? Well, that is the question today. But first, back to big tech. Why are people so angry at them? Well, I think it's because we discovered their secret. Users have discovered that the win-win of free information traded for attention and access to their data, it isn't actually free. A guy named Nir Aral, author of a book called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products, says this, and I quote, "The technologies we use today have turned into compulsions, if not full-fledged addictions. It's the impulse to check a message notification. It's the pull to visit YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter just for a few minutes, only to find yourself still tapping and scrolling an hour later. None of this is by accident. It's rather by design." And now on to the car companies. How do they make money? Well, car companies, for the most part, they make money the old-fashioned way, right? They build useful products and they make profit per vehicle sale. It's honest pay for honest work. They make over 2.7 trillion in sales and 800 billion in aftermarket and shared mobility revenue. But of course, car makers aren't blind, right? They see the opportunity to capitalize on their hard-earned relationship with car buyers who will drive that vehicle for a dozen years after the initial sale. They see the opportunity for a new business model, mobility as a service. They see the opportunity for data, partner fees. They want, and quite frankly, they deserve a big piece of the pie. Okay, now let's talk about the third participant in this battle, the one who often experiences the most collateral damage, and that's the driver. Now, we all know this idealized driver, well-coiffed, does a complete safety check before wheels up, attentive, smart, and responsible. We love designing for this guy, but I think there are more typical drivers. This is my daughter, Maggie. This is her in her 2007 Honda Civic. She doesn't care about the car and its tech. She just wants to get her outdoor stuff to the great outdoors. Now, as an interesting aside, one weekend, my wife, son, and I borrowed Maggie's car for a trip to the mountains. On the mountain pass, a car in front of us stopped suddenly, and so did we, but the full-size pickup truck behind us did not stop. And it slammed into us from behind at 50 miles per hour, crushing us into the car in front of us. Amazingly, we staggered out of the car, and the shock driver of the pickup truck came racing out of the car to see if we were okay. I asked him, what happened? And he said he didn't see us stop because he was messing around with his iPad. Now, I couldn't believe he actually admitted that, but like I said, I think he was in shock. So we know people are going to bring in their phones and tablets into the car. That ship has sailed. But the question is, what tech do drivers want that's actually permanently attached to the car? Well, researchers found this out by asking the question, what are the most valuable use cases for tech in the car? Now, the results shouldn't be surprising to you. Above all else, they simply wanted their car to take care of them. So now we know the players and their motivations. Car companies want to sell cars. Tech companies want to sell attention and data. Travelers want safety. And how do all these players mix? Well, let's start with big tech. Why do they want in your car? They want information, data, attention. Well, they want just about everything, right? And why not? Like, if car companies are naive enough to give it to them, they're going to take it. But of course, we know car companies are not that naive, but they do have their own agenda. And what do they want? Simply put, their drivers want access to third-party apps like Spotify, Audible, Podcasts, Google, Amazon, and Apple Maps. Yep, they can already get that on their phone, but it might actually be more convenient to use the vehicle screens, which are more accessible and easier to see and interact with. But there are downsides, right? And there are a lot of them, from lack of functional safety coverage to hacking vulnerabilities, and most notably, the liability around distracted driving caused by big tech. It's now in the hands of the OEM, since the content is displayed on the OEM screen. And so when something goes wrong, a vehicle is recalled because of an IVI bug, the OEM has no leverage necessarily to get big tech to fix the problem quickly. But even with these issues, big tech has infiltrated the cockpit and still pushes to gain more access. OEMs, tech companies, and drivers now are engaged in this dance. And this dance could actually be a good thing if done right. And it also can be done right if we are aware of what can go wrong. So what could go wrong? Well, unfortunately, a lot. And it's no surprise that these consumer grade and often open source solutions are going to have holes. On the other hand, industrial automotive grade RTOSs from companies like Green Hills or QNX or others, they have vulnerabilities at a much lower rate. But even more important, their business is geared towards these situations, so they can plug vulnerabilities at the OEM's request. And let's talk GDPR. It's not just a customer relationship risk for OEMs, but it's also a large financial risk. And according to the GDPR, data generated in a vehicle is the property of the driver. This clarification of ownership puts significant data privacy compliance burden on car manufacturers, also on the rental car companies and the fleet operators. They're now liable. And to make matters worse, Intel data estimates that a single self-driving car can generate as much data as about 3,000 people. That is, if there are 1 million self-driving cars out there, they would create data that would equal 3 billion people. And this puts the car makers in the hot seat. The sheer volume of data is extremely overwhelming, and data leaks can be seriously damning for the business and may result in losing the customer base to all their competitors. So, the most important question here today is, can I rely on big tech stability given the ongoing tech lash and concern around security, antitrust, AI abuse, and distraction? Well, the answer is probably yes, but the flavor will change from year to year. And of course, moving targets are always a challenge to build products around. So OEMs have to expect some chaos, and thus they have to architect their systems to be able to remove third-party tech from their cars without bricking the vehicle and rendering it worthless. So what we as the auto industry, what control do we have over the cockpit? And that's the cockpit architecture. And that mitigates the risk of including these technologies, which have a lot of value to the driver as well as the OEM. So significant research has been done on this subject. And this call out from a Capgemini report sums up the research quite well. But the bottom line is that OEMs should own and build stuff that is critical to the car and driver. And quite frankly, in a speeding car, just about everything is considered critical. To keep customers' trust, third parties need to be kept away from critical vehicle functions. These services are the ones customers value the most, so they have the greatest revenue and demand potential also in the future. Okay, so let's dig in and see what this means at the architectural level. All right, every new car built today has a cluster, an IVI system, some have a HUD, and the cluster and the HUD are extremely safety critical and must be covered under ISO development standards. If the IVI displays critical information, it also must be covered under ISO 26262. The cockpit might have additional displays that monitor control vehicle functions, and the whole thing is controlled by an extremely reliable and safe real-time operating system. It all runs under an automotive-grade microprocessor, and a hardwire CAN or LIN bus winds through the vehicle and is very carefully controlled by the RTOS. And if necessary, communication hardware and software wirelessly connected to the internet or satellite-based services. All right, so far so good. And a few 100 million vehicles on the road today successfully use this strategy. But then along came this extremely helpful thing called a smartphone. And for obvious reasons, people brought them into the car and mounted them onto the dashboard. Now, while they might be dangerously distracting, the car companies couldn't stop them. But they also weren't connected to the vehicle, so the OEMs weren't liable. It worked, but it was clunky. It was hard to read, and it got in the way. So then we stuck the phone back in the cup holder and created some screen space for it and connected it to the IVI. Right, that's a bit better, but and it's still not too dangerous because of the limited access to the rest of the car. All right, so the next evolution was to put the phone back in your pocket and install an app OS like Android or Windows or iOS directly to the IVI. Okay, this seems wildly dangerous because the IVI could get access to the CAN bus and operation of the vehicle. But with judicious use of a hypervisor, you can isolate it from the rest of the critical systems and keep it safe. And that's where we landed today. It's a really solid compromise. But then we go back to the question, what should the OEM build and own? Well, realistically, just about everything but the microprocessor. But even that's kind of changing right now, given the vulnerabilities to the chip shortage. And by build, I mean the OEM should be responsible for its creation. But it's the tier ones and the commercial software partners like Altia and the others in this conference, will do the heavy lifting. But it's the OEMs who need to use tried and true technologies and suppliers. And in an Altia's case, we've been designed into over 120 million vehicles, and none have ever been recalled because of our software. And everything we do has to be safety certified. So here's the other consideration. If something happens to this third-party big tech app platform, let's say there's a lawsuit or a security breach or a commercial dispute, or some kind of antitrust regulation set forth by governments, well, then the OEM needs to be able to remotely remove or turn off the system. And the car still needs to operate. You still need a climate control system, a radio, maybe even a nav system. Otherwise you've just got this brick on wheels that you have to pull over to the side of the road. Okay, so we've come this far. Then the next logical step is to just replace the entire operating system with one of these big tech OSs, right? But then, of course, that would simply mean that the OEM has lost complete control of the cockpit and the car. And so now you might as well just call it an Apple car or a Google car and treat the traditional OEMs like a tier one hardware supplier. Well, that definitely ain't going to happen, nor should it. And quite honestly, even the big tech platforms and the app providers don't want that responsibility. So again, this is where we've landed, and we'll probably stay at this architecture for quite a long time. And to survive in this world, you're going to have to pick a user interface technology and an architecture that can build portable GUIs for native OEM or real-time operating systems that are designed and developed by the OEMs. And that same technology must also be applicable to third-party app ecosystems like Android or whatever else becomes the flavor of the day. And this is the essence of the next generation automotive architecture. Okay, so now the real reason we're here, and that's the user experience. So remember the Doherty threshold? It's being used as a weapon by social media, but it can also be used as a fantastic tool, right? So the benefits of the Doherty threshold is massive. If you can keep a user engaged and focused with no room to stray, then she can get the job done with the least distraction possible and then get back to focusing on the road. So my request for you, my fellow UX developers here, is to use this tool to keep the driver safe. Then release her as soon as possible so she can safely engage in the driving task at hand. But please do not abuse this 400 millisecond rule. Today, there are some really groundbreaking new UX technologies. Autonomous driving, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, 3D, voice control, emotional UIs. Let's keep charging forward with these. And let's keep trying to figure out ways for the OEM to also monetize their hard-earned ownership of the cockpit. But no matter what you do, always remember to put the driver first. And if you do, the business model will take care of itself. When I say put the driver first, I don't want you to think of the tech executive or your fellow engineer, but I want you to think of this very precious cargo. They don't want to think about the car. Instead, this family just wants to get to their destination safely and quickly. And they want to focus on each other, not on the car, and especially not social media and tech. All right, so back to the battle. Like, I presented this battle as a bit of in a bit of a bleak light, but I have to admit it was mostly for dramatic effect. But in reality, I think we're on our way to a new period of collaboration. I think big tech has learned the hard way that it's not easy building a car and also being responsible for the life and death of its occupants. There is some newfound respect for us in the auto industry, and together, I think we can really do great things. In fact, I really believe that the tech companies have now left the door wide open for the auto industry to once again become the most trusted technology provider in the world. And the essence of making that happen will be the quality of the user experience that we in this room create for the driver. That will make or break that trust and solidify our reputation for the next 100 years. So thank you all for your undivided attention. I think I value it more than you can even imagine. So, Dr. Rosker, I just want to hand it back to you. Would love to take some questions if we have some time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike, for this extremely thoughtful presentation. And I really like the level of reflection that you had in this one, whether it's the 60 miles per hour safety security thing that you had. And you will be aware that we in Germany do not have a speed limit. So every now and then you find people with 250 kilometers per hour and still fiddling around with a smartphone. And also the warnings on the takeover of the automotive cockpit through big tech, through the Apples, Googles, and Microsofts of this world. I very much appreciate this thoughtful reflection. I think we have time for a very few quick questions with focused answers. Is there any in the room that we can open up the discussion? Okay, so one from me. You talked about that we have this dangerous situation of a takeover of car cockpits through big tech. What are, from your point of view, the alternatives we have? I mean, users are asking for all these services. They're expecting this level of service. They're expecting this kind of user experience. What can OEMs actually do, from your point of view, to get the maximum experience without selling their souls?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to the architecture. If and they have figured out ways to sandbox those apps. I mean, what the user wants really is the app access to some key applications. Amazon being one of them, right? They may want to make purchases as they go. But then limiting the amount of access those apps have to the critical systems in the car, I think will be a great compromise. Secondly, a lot of car companies are turning into software companies and really investing in that. Volkswagen, for example, has an operating system of their own, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there to create something that's optimized for the car, including the operating system. This thing we have in our pocket, it was optimized for a single screen solution that you can focus on 100%. The car is a different beast, so it needs different technology and different software.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us. I don't know, are you East Coast or West Coast in the States?
Right in the middle, in Colorado.
All right. So is it very early or very late for you in your time zone?
Well, it depends on what you did on Sunday, but it's 2 a.m. here in Colorado.
All right. This is an extra round of applause for you being awake at that time to serve us.
Thank you. I wish I was there. I dreamed about this all year, and unfortunately, you're still not letting us travel there, but I look forward to being there soon.
All right. Hope to see you face to face soon, Mike. Thanks a lot for contributing here. Thank you.
Thank you.